we have another couple of chapters to go in terms of learning about carrying in and out on Shabbat. But we've left the questions of how much we can carry, and we're entering into questions of, borderline cases where we might or might not be liable. And actually, the first of these, we're going to deal with 3 borderline cases today at the beginning of the 10th chapter. The first of them is actually related to quantity. So it's very interesting. The Mishnah is moving from quantity to, if you like, to quality. It's moving from how much we carry to how we carry it. But it's going to begin these borderline cases actually with a borderline case that involves a quantity. And it's going to remind us of a principle that we learned in the 7th chapter. Remember, in the 7th chapter, there were 3 principles, and one of those was that anything which is fit to store, and people like to store things like it, creates a liability if you carry it out on Shabbat. So the minimum quantity seems to depend on whether people want to store it. And the Mishnah mentioned there that 2 different people who had 2 different requirements might have 2 different quantities that determine their liability for carrying on Shabbat. And it's very interesting. We couldn't really understand why these principles suddenly appeared in the middle of the Mishnah in chapter 7. And it's very interesting that this principle of, if you like, personal usefulness is taught again. It needn't perhaps have been taught at the beginning of chapter 7, because it's taught again in our Mishnah today. Someone stores something for planting, or for seeds, or for a sample, or for medicine. They carried out on Shabbat, they're liable whatever its amount. In other words, whatever amount is worth setting aside is an amount for which you're liable for taking out on Shabbat. And other people are different. All other people are not liable except for the standard measure. This is a personal issue relating to the person that stored it away. And then, Chazar v'hichniso, he changed his mind. He changed his mind about using it for planting or a sample for a medicine, and he carried it back in. Eino chayav, he's not liable. Or eino chayav alav ela kishuro, he's only liable for the standard measure. So when it was his intention to take it out and use it as an example or for medicine, he was liable at that point for whatever quantity. He changes his mind and he brings it back in, both for the bringing in actually and for any subsequent bringing out. He's not liable unless he brings a standard measure, because his mind has changed, his attitude to this object has changed, and so the if you like, the dependence on the standard weight has changed. Very interesting example of how thought creates a halachic reality. Let's keep going. That's one borderline case, but we're going to learn 2 more. The first one is about an action which is half complete. And we touched on this in the first Mishnah of the Masechet. Do you remember the first Mishnah of the Masechet? Yetziot HaShabbat Shtaim Shehen Arba Bifnim Ushtaim Shehen Arba B'chutz Ketzad. There are 4 carryings out. There are 2 carryings out of Shabbat, which are 4 from inside, and 2 which are 4 from the outside. And we learned about the poor man standing outside and the rich man standing inside, and they're passing things in and out. And we learned that if their actions combine, neither one of them is liable. And again, today's Mishnah is going to reiterate this principle or re-imply it. Someone carries out food and places it on the threshold. And so the Gemara assumes this is a sort of a carmelit. A carmelit is a place that's neither public nor private. It's on the boundary. He's put it on the threshold of his property. Now, subsequently, someone's going to take this food and bring it out into the public domain. Maybe he's going to do it subsequently, or maybe someone else entirely is going to do it subsequently. But the Mishnah says, Patur, he's exempt. Because he didn't do it in one go. To be chayav, to be liable to bring a sin offering, you have to do the action in one go. That's not to say, by the way, it's permitted to do it in two goes. But in order to be obligated with a sin offering, you have to do it in one go. You can't do it in two half steps, as we learned in the first Mishnah of the Masachet. And similarly, kupashi milea perot. What about a basket which is full of produce? And we learned a couple of days ago that a basket full of different objects is treated as one object. The basket's treated as one object. Remember, we had a peddler's basket full of different things, and we learned you only have to bring one offering for bringing this whole basket out on Shabbat. So a basket, kupashi mila perot. So there's a basket full of produce. He's actually placed on the outer threshold, so it's nearly outside. Even though most of the fruit are actually outside, it's outside the threshold. Patur, he's exempt. Ad shiotzi et kol ha kupa. He's patur unless he actually takes out the whole of the basket. The basket is a single unit. And if we don't take the whole of that unit out, we're not liable for a sin offering. And then the third borderline case is about unusual ways of doing this. And actually, we talk about this today. We say, oh, yeah, if you need to turn a light on Shabbat, do it with a shinui, do it with a different way of doing things. And the Mishnah seems to know about this method. Be smaller. Someone who carries something out, whether with his right or with his left hand. So we're not talking about right and left here. Or al ktefo, on his in his lap, on his shoulder, chayav, he's obligated. Sheken masah b'nei Kahat. The sons of Kahat didn't get any wagons. The wagons were given by the princes to Moshe, and Moshe handed them out to the Leviim, but he didn't give the princes of the children of Kahat any wagons, because the children of Kahat carried on the shoulder. Kain masah b'nei Sheken masah b'nei Kahat, and we've learned already that the acts of Shabbat are very closely connected to the acts of the Mishkan. So those are considered normal ways of carrying. But if he carried it backhanded, or with his foot, or with his mouth, or in his elbow, uvamar pekato, amar pek is an elbow in Hebrew. Very interesting. Shakespeare apparently made up the word elbow in English. So at the time of the Mishnah, the word elbow didn't exist in England, but the word marpek does in Hebrew. It does in the Mishnah anyway. I don't think it's a biblical word. In his elbow, he could carry it in his hair, in his ear, in his belt with its opening downwards. This is a sort of a cloth belt that you'd wind round yourself, but you'd wind money up in it. In between his belt and his shirt, in the hem of his shirt, b'minalo, in his shoe, b'sandlo, another nice Greek word, in his sandals, patur, he's exempt. Because he's exempt, shelo chotzi kederech hamotziin, because he hasn't carried it out in the way that people normally carry things out. So to summarize, we've had three boundary cases in these first three Mishnayot. One was a question where someone changed their mind. So they changed their mind as to whether they wanted to keep this object safe or tucked away. And because they changed their mind, the critical quantity changed. And the second Mishnah is a borderline case because a single person didn't complete the action, or perhaps a single person completed it at two different times. And in the third borderline case, we're carrying, but we're doing it in an unusual way. And in all three of these borderline cases, the Mishnah rules patur, exempt from a sin offering. Not that it's encouraging you to go out and do all these things, but if you do this in this way, you're not liable for an offering.